Well, alrighty. This kind of reads like a sci-fi kind of dream. It was weird. But Dream 9. So in this one, I was dreaming and there was a spaceship off in the distance. And there were gentle flowing green fields. But off in the distance, there was a spaceship. And off this spaceship, there were these kids. And they were taking off or launching drones from the wings of the spaceship. And there was a guy that was on one of these hills next to the spaceship working on his Samsung Jeep, and he was jacking it up. But it was on a hill, so I was kind of worried that it was going to tip over. And it almost did tip over, and he freaked out about it. Was really worried that it was going to fall over. And I said, hey, you don't need to worry. It's covered or it's insured, you know? And he said, yeah, well, please don't let it tip because it's still a $5,000 deductible. Like, okay, that makes sense. Maybe you shouldn't jack it up on the side of the hill, I thought. But after watching him and his interesting Jeep thing, I looked over at the spaceship and I watched these drones take off and then land. I was curious and I wanted to see what was up, so I went to the spaceship for this test ride. They called it Borneo, the Maiden Voyage. Very grandiose. And it was obviously well marketed because there were people going up and down this line to get on this maiden voyage. And out of this line, people were pulled out of line and all of their electronics were confiscated. And then one person got handcuffed. Well, in this dream, I was an investigative conspiracy book writer. And now that I was there, it was clear that that's why I was there. I was there to go on this test voyage across the country in the spaceship as they tested all the systems. And the crew were supposed to act like this was a real trip into space. It's part of what made people want to get on it. It was marketed as this, adventure into space, but you didn't actually have to go into space. So in this line, I got in it, and I was handed my friend's Apple Watch after he got arrested, and then arrested and put on the spaceship, which I thought was weird. I got out of line, and then as I was getting out of line, someone stole the watch, but I saw them try to slip it out of sight and get away with the theft, so I went and I confronted them. They denied that they stole from me, which was ridiculous, I felt. I had seen it, but because I persisted and pointed out the evidences, eventually, after they had spent so much time lying about it, I pointed out the evidence of their thievery that they could no longer, get away from. They got all aggressive and angry because they were cornered. They couldn't keep lying because it was clear that everyone knew that they were lying, especially me, the one that was confronting them. Eventually, they did relent. They gave it back. But by this point, the wait in line was over, and I was able to get on the craft. The way to enter the craft was by going through this kind of play with one of the workers. You would look at them, and you would look at them with this look of shock, and then you would read their name badge, and you would say something like, "You're Roberta Stein?" Just being shocked. Well, Roberta Stein, who I looked at and pretended I was shocked to meet her, she was shocked that I knew her. Which was ridiculous. I didn't know her. I just read her name badge, and she had done it multiple times. Maybe she was playing along really well. I don't know. It just so happened, though, that she was a reader of mine. So naturally, super paranoid about everything, really into conspiracy theories. Saw everything as some kind of trick. But she was really excited to let me through. So she took me in to the spacecraft and showed me around. And she took me into the crew hold, where she showed me all the good stuff that would be interesting to readers of mine or readers of conspiracy theories. In there, I was taking pictures and taking notes. And then she told me, hey, the people in charge of this spaceship, in charge of this voyage, they're lying to people. So she figured I was there to break the story of their malfeasance. I actually had just been there because it looked like fun test trip. So, yeah, sure, I was going to write about it, but I didn't think that there was some type of malfeasance in the back. But she said it wasn't a test flight or a marketing campaign to get more funding for Borneo, the maiden voyage, whatever it was. So essentially what they were doing is they were getting people onto the spacecraft for a particular, malevolent purpose. That's why they were rough with some of the people in line, arresting them, taking things away from them. The people had been tricked into buying a ticket, but they were actually going to leave the world and never return again. My response was, hey, well, but you can cancel your contract, though. And then she said, but you can't actually cancel your contract. Okay, perfect. I thought, I need to investigate this. So I went from there. I went over to the place where it was like the place you were supposed to go to cancel your contract. There were just a bunch of lines and people there to cancel their contracts. So in line to cancel, I noticed as soon as I got there that everyone was super dejected, really, really depressed people. And they were really depressed leaving the building. And what I heard them say when they left was, I guess I'll have to go. So the people, after these long lines and many forms, were outside, laying on the ground, just waiting to get on the spaceship, demoralized, like they had no choice. The lines would move from one customer service rep to another, frustrating people through bureaucracy. So I cut in line and chatting with this pregnant lady in front of me. I pretended like I knew her and chatted and just cut in line so I wouldn't have to wait. And then as soon as she was done, the rep right in front of me started to record, and she said, thank you. Next in line. And I said, hey, can you get out of your contract? I have been informed that you can't get out of your contract. So she smiled and said, of course you can, but you're going to need to ask the next rep, the one that was like right to her left, like right next to her. Like if the lady had been listening, she could have overheard the whole thing. Anyway, it was kind of ridiculous. I had seen that people were just moving down the line, getting to a rep, and then they had to go to the very back of the line and start over again. Over and over and over and over again. Just one more down. So instead of playing that game, I reached across the counter and I grabbed her by the collar, dragged her across the counter, threw her on the floor, and held her down threateningly, and yelled in her face that everyone was saying the same thing to move along. And what the heck was going on? So she said she got paid to say, of course you can cancel and go to the next rep. And that's all she was trained to do. She didn't know anything else. And that she got paid $1,000 a day to say it. So they were just trying to frustrate people into acceptance. I figured in my conspiracy theory mind that, well, you know what? This is probably just some crew or wealthy people that are collecting all these bodies for their 1,000-year journey so they can suck the life out of people. It was an interesting dream. That was how it ended. Didn't really get to the end and didn't get to see how it finished up, but for me, it was kind of like this a psychological sci-fi thriller, but from the symbolic perspective, seemed to explore themes of institutional betrayal or the illusion of choice and a power of a truth-seeking archetype in this dream. So the symbols that jumped out a lot was the fragility of security shown by this Jeep and the deductible. It's where it begins. There's this Samsung Jeep, which is weird because as far as I know, Samsung doesn't make Jeeps. They make like TVs or fridges or whatever. But it was on a steep hill. And so a brand that's associated with consumer technology was making a car. And this guy's anxiety was over this $5,000 deductible. It suggests that there's this feeling that even when things are insured or covered in life, there's still a high personal cost to failure. It sets this tone of financial and structural instability. And then the next symbol jumped out was this deception of the test flight. The core of the dream is around this Borneo maiden voyage. So in dreams, it seems that spaceships often represent this major life transition or a launch into the unknown, right? So the conspiracy writer, which was played by my persona, is essentially like my subconscious in investigative mode. I'm not just a passenger. I'm someone who looks beneath the surface. I want to figure things out. It's important to understand things. And then they're going through and they're confiscating things. They're taking electronics. They're arresting people. So they're losing their possessions and their autonomy. They're stripped of their connection to the outside world so that they can be trapped in the deception. There's this confrontation with the stolen watch as well, where the watch is this tool for time, but it was a smartwatch, so it could communicate as well. So I had to regain it through confrontation, essentially showing that there needs to be an unwillingness to be gaslit. I saw the thief, I named it, I stood my ground even though they tried to fight it off, which was a foreshadowing for later aggression that I showed against the bureaucracy of the cancellation lines. Essentially, it's someone that I am. I demand accountability when others are lying, or I should demand accountability when others are lying. It isn't kind to allow people to get away with dishonesty. Then we had this Roberta Stein, which is like this inside ally, right? So there's this fan who's paranoid, who recognizes me as this classic helper archetype, and then she reveals information that changes the stakes, takes it from this marketing campaign to a one-way trip, a trap, which seems to reflect in my waking life that certain opportunities or contracts, social obligations, social systems, investments, works can find something that may be marketed, but it's actually just a trap. And it's designed to keep you from returning to what you had before or the status quo. It's a trap. And then we have this bureaucracy of no or next. All these customer service reps in a line in this powerful nightmare imagery. Like everyone hates the DMV. Everyone, well, not everyone. Most normal people don't like waiting in line. We'll just say that. They had weaponized frustration. The reps were paid 1,000 a day for silence and ignorance. And they were there to provide the illusion of a solution, which in my dream seemed to be a critique of the current system that is the politeness system. It can be bureaucratic, but also the way that people engage with each other. Instead of being honest and answering questions, they say what they think the person is going to want to receive. And instead of just being blunt with people, kind of shimmy around the subject, or we don't give the full truth, or we pass the buck. And this is this polite bureaucracy. It's just to exhaust people in life. The politeness behavior that we all suffer, to me, is super frustrating. It's a nightmare, but it's so prevalent in so many people's relationships, in so many businesses, in so many institutions. It's pretty bad. So there was this physical break in my dream. My choice was to grab the rep, drag them over, threaten them. It's this total rejection of playing by the rules that I am moving away from this system of fundamentally being dishonest, where civil discourse is no longer an effective tool, or just trying to always be the nice person in an interaction. If it's leading you to be dishonest and not be direct with people, because it's, in quotes, kind or for the purpose, that's something that probably needs to stop, or we need to break with that. And then I had this last visual at the end of this 1,000-year journey that was essentially set up to be life-sucking. That the wealthy or the crew intended to use the passengers as fuel. or bodies, where they were just using them as, sustenance for their ultimate expression of exploitation, to just use them for their own needs. This, for me, was this visualization or symbol of a fear of being consumed by a system, like a corporation or a social structure that views individuals as resources rather than people. So the question is, are there situations in my life, your life, whoever's life, where you feel you're being managed by a bureaucracy or by a family or by a business or by a system rather than being heard? In my life, I'm sure I can find multiple of them because I've had to think about it. The next one is like, do you feel a sense of responsibility to expose a truth or protect others from like bad deals? And how seriously do I take that responsibility is important. It's an important question. And then the other is there a contract or a commitment in life that feels hard to get out of or harder than you were originally told? What kind of commitments do you need to decommit from and that seem that they're extraordinarily difficult to get out of? In the end, in this one, there are some commitments and contracts that are difficult to get out of, but will lead you to this life-sucking situation where you'll just be used up as a consumable. So, what in my life do I need to decommit from or go through the difficult process of decommitting from? And to look for those. Sometimes our lives get too busy, too wild for us to continue to do everything. There's some things that we just shouldn't do because it's not all that it was marketed to be. There's, that's going to be different for every person. Anyway, yeah, that was dream number 9, I believe. All right, cool. Have a good one, guys.